Okay, well, my story is the main reason people are getting education is to get the stamps, saying that I went to Harvard or George Mason and I got these grades with this major. Most of what's happening is not actually that you're learning useful stuff. Most of what you learn in school is totally useless in the real world, barely relevant anyway. A lot of it's general ed that you really don't need to know at all. And then finally, you get a job. Like, how does education help you get a job according to me? Well, the answer is employers get a whole bunch of applications. And then the question is, well, which ones do I throw away? And the simplest thing to do in a world where there's this much education is throw out all the ones with less education, all the ones with less prestigious education, and then out of the remaining ones, then consider those people for interviews. So basically, education is a way to get your foot in the door, to get not your application automatically get thrown in the trash. How scalable is this? If we let in one person, we know for a fact it's going to massively enrich not just that person, but the world, because they're producing a lot more than they were producing before. We can let in two people. We can have 5, 10, 100. We can do all that. 1,000, sure. 10,000, yes. 100,000, yes. 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, a billion. The only intellectually serious question is there some point where there are some negative side effects of immigration that are so awful that they overpower those incredible obvious gains? What I do in the book is go over all of the major complaints about the alleged horrible, bad side effects of immigration and say some of them are just wrong, and the others are overstated. And so this really is just an incredible opportunity to enrich not just immigrants, but us as their customers. And so, yes, the more the merrier, really. Right. And if you say this is all just a bunch of ivory tower nonsense, say no, wrong. There are a number of countries that are close to the policies I recommend.
I'm Dr. Randy Bach, and I'm honored today to have with me Professor Bryan Caplan. He's at George Mason University, and maybe someday George Mason will be at Bryan Caplan University. You never know. He is an imaginative thinker, unconventional, and so forth. And I'm here to ask him why his ideas are not the conventional ideas. And maybe we could, I don't start with anything top of mind, but what is most interesting for me is kind of the education thing we have, which seems to be kind of a rent-sought sinecure, really good mechanism for keeping teachers or people who pretend to be teachers paid and pensioned and so forth throughout life, to work 150 days of the year and get full salary, kind of the full employment for whatever. You tell me. But education has been, Garrett Wilson, or was a guy from Saturday Night Live, baseball has been very, very good to me. Education has been very, very good to some of us. Is it for everybody? And what's the deal?
Right. If you think, by the way, that 150 days a year isn't that hard of a job, try being a research professor with 150 hours of teaching per year, which is what I've got. And I know people who have even less than I do. The main thing that I say about education is that while it definitely is rewarding for the individual, it is much less clear that it's rewarding for society. Why? Because most of what you learn in school is not actually relevant in the real world. My book, The Case Against Education, runs with this and says this real story is that most of what goes on in school is what economists call signaling. You're basically jumping through hoops in order to impress future employers. And while that does work, assuming you're good at it, the problem is that since you're not learning useful skills, it doesn't really raise your productivity. So the main effect of rising education has been credential inflation, which means that you need more and more degrees to get the same jobs that your parents and grandparents got with fewer.
My grandparents, one of them, both of them were emigres from East Europe, and turn of the 20th century. And the one I was more familiar with lived longer. He had maybe fifth or sixth grade education or whatever. Wound up running businesses here. Had some shops. Was successful by any standard. His literacy, I assume, was okay. but he had none of the,
Mhm.
higher education. High school originally was called high school because it was higher education.
Mhm.
So there's
Ah,
kind of been an inflation of terms. Elementary school was the elements. Those are things that you need to get by to become a clerk and whatnot. And high school was somebody, who might be the actuary or the mayor or whatever, because that was higher schooling.
mhm.
And of course now high school degree is, equivalent of, I don't know what, Kleenex, who knows?
Well, I mean, so yeah, in the data, you'll see that high school grads usually earn like 25% more than high school dropouts. And some of that probably is causal.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, it could go the other way. It could be that some people are so reprobate and criminal they didn't pass high school and
Yes.
they're not going to get real jobs anyway.
Yes, yes. So again, when social scientists go and look at these numbers, they try to go and adjust for those things as best they can. Sometimes it's hard, but yes, there is plenty of evidence that getting a high school degree is better for a career than just dropping out of high school, and it's in fact one of the easiest ways of getting a substantial increase in your lifetime earnings. But the reason is not that you're learning really useful stuff in high school. It's again getting that stamp on your forehead saying, like, at least I finished high school. I'm not in the very bottom group.
So there's a system that's been, I think the system has morphed. I'm not sure how much of the history of education here. I went to the Horace Mann School in New York City, which is a private school, ironically enough, because it's named after the guy who wanted public school to exist. His concept was that you needed to have some basic formatting, like you have the old floppy disk, you put them in, they don't work, they have to be formatted for your computer. So the computer
Right, sure.
has a relationship. So you need to format citizens. And so there was a high immigration at the time, as there has been probably throughout ever since. And so we all had to have some basic knowledge. So I mean, maybe you and I both understand, how baseball is played. A lot of people come over from the UK, they're like, what? I go watch cricket. I'm like, what is that? So we have this kind of foundational aspect, but how does it stand right now, and what are the failures? And if education is not really useful for everybody, what do they do instead?
Well, the main thing that we can do to find out what do people learn in school is we can go and test knowledge of the basic subjects. And especially it is a good idea to test it in adults, because the fact that someone knows something on test day doesn't mean they're going to know it for the rest of their life. If you are trying to actually give people foundational knowledge, then it makes more sense to go and test them as adults. This is logistically really hard to go and give high school exams to people who've been out of school for 5, 10, or 30 years, but it has been done to a moderate degree. And the main punchline of all this research is that Americans' knowledge of basic stuff is very low. Literacy and numeracy are much worse than you would assume. And then knowledge of the other subjects, natural science, history, civics, foreign language, it's basically zero. It's just a rounding error above zero.
So what's the alternative? I mean, I think there's kind of a just-in-time model. My kids are resourceful. They learn stuff when they want to learn stuff. They watch YouTube. I wanted to fix something in my sink the other day. In the old days, I might have called somebody, but now I just found my sink. I found my drain stopper. I saw some really useful tips about not having certain things fall down, whatever. And I learned that thing. I did that thing. Is that the education model? Is it happening? Can we find a way to it? Can we accelerate that? Or what is your alternative idea? Or, do we just have people kind of go back to the apprentice model?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, to say that right now, in a sense, the apprentice model never leaves us, because the real way people learn job skills is primarily on the job, because most of what's taught in class is just not relevant in real life. The slogan that I like for my book is that we like to think about education as being job training, whereas really education is a passport to the real training that happens on the job. Are we going to move further in that direction? Maybe a little bit. But I mean, honestly, as long as government keeps shoveling money onto the status quo, then I don't think very much will change.
So we have, George Mason University, despite its name, I think it's a state-sponsored school.
That's correct. Yep.
University of Virginia or something like that. You tell me.
Yep.
We have, when we watch football or basketball, whatever, it's Michigan versus Michigan State, Iowa versus Iowa State. There's a whole bunch of schools. A fair number of them are state supported. Then, every now and then you see Gonzaga or whatever. there's some private schools.
Mhm.
We have an interesting system of public schools, which are government run for the most part. And well, I suppose all the public schools are. And then we have the kind of higher education part, which has the auspices of the individual states. Um, what's up with that? How did that system get created? Is it kind of running, basically eventually bankrupting the private institutions, which don't have limitless pockets and can't tax the municipalities for their existence?
Right. So I'm not actually an expert on the history of the U.S. college system. I know that you have a lot of land grants universities where they basically get started in the early days, often I think even before a state is a state, when it's just a territory, and they say, here's a bunch of free land, and you can use that land to build a college, and you can also sell off some land in order to get some money to go and fund the college. The story about our public universities bankrupting private ones, it's a very interesting point because yes, public universities charge a lot less in tuition because they have a lot of subsidies. I think actually the best measure of the total subsidy that government is giving to education or to college is just the difference between private sector net tuition and public sector net tuition. Net tuition being the money you actually have to pay after they go and give you scholarships and adjustment and discounts and things like that. And so yes, it's true. The public schools are basically predating on private ones and using taxpayer funding to allow them to charge quite less than private schools. The main result is there's a bunch of small private schools that have gone bankrupt. They're just the puzzle about why these schools exist in the first place because they're usually so mediocre. The most successful, richest schools in America are all private, and I don't think they are in the slightest danger because they're offering an extra prestigious product, an extra strong signal. And like I said, the main thing people are looking for in school is not learning, it's the stamp on your forehead. Harvard, awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that's there. It's like there's huge grade inflation at Harvard.
Mhm.
I think the
Sure.
median grade is A minus.
Yeah.
And the mean is not probably much different.
Mean,
It's probably
yeah.
obviously
Means
lower,
probably
but
means probably higher. Means like
the mean,
3.8,
no, because there's going
3.8.
to be an F here and there or D that's going to
Yeah,
drop
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah. But
mean
so
down.
the A minus is 3.7 and the A is 4.0, and you're giving out enough A's, then those A's can actually balance off those very small number of lower grades. I
Fair
think it's
enough,
actually
but
more like
as it turns
3.8,
out,
a
I
little
think
bit,
the mean
little
is
above
low.
A minus.
But be that as it may, it just seems that people don't necessarily have to work that hard if there's not that much
Mhm.
stratification in
Mhm.
grading. So why don't you, for our viewers unfamiliar with your book, why don't you give us the basic concept? We have the premise here that education is overdone.
Mhm.
What, why, how, and what then?
Okay, well, my story is the main reason people are getting education is to get the stamps, saying that I went to Harvard or George Mason and I got these grades with this major. Most of what's happening is not actually that you're learning useful stuff. Most of what you learn in school is totally useless in the real world, barely relevant anyway. A lot of it's general ed that you really don't need to know at all. And then finally, you get a job. Like, how does education help you get a job according to me? Well, the answer is employers get a whole bunch of applications. And then the question is, well, which ones do I throw away? And the simplest thing to do in a world where there's this much education is throw out all the ones with less education, all the ones with less prestigious education, and then out of the remaining ones, then consider those people for interviews. So basically, education is a way to get your foot in the door, to get not your application automatically get thrown in the trash. In terms of what you're studying, so yeah, I mean, or just to back up, it's true that standards are very low in some majors. There are other majors where standards are still high. So math standards are still high. Physics standards are still high. They will not give you an A or even a B in math and physics if you can't do the work. On the other hand, there's plenty of other majors there. They just pass almost anybody along. That's the system that we have. And then the puzzle is, well, then why is it that so many people don't finish? The answer is no matter how low you put the standards, people fall below those low standards. If you just say you have to show up, a lot of people won't show up. If you say you have to go and turn in your assignments, doesn't matter how good they are, a lot of people just won't turn in the assignments. Or people will go and fail to actually take the classes they need to graduate, and then they're there for 5 years, like, oh, whoops, I had to do it. There's a foreign language requirement here. I didn't do it. So now I don't get my degree.
So you have another book about the value of having kids and more of them.
Yep.
So we're going to segue a little bit, talk about that aspect, whether those are economic values. I enjoy my men now. I think having kids was the most enjoyable thing probably in my life. This interview accepted.
All right. Well, thank you.
The question I have is, so how many, who are they? What are they up to? And what was your, as Homer Simpson would say, what was your theme of education for them?
Let's see. So I only have 4 kids. The first 2 are identical twins, and I started homeschooling them in grade 7 and homeschooled them all the way to college. And they're seniors at Vanderbilt getting ready to start PhDs and probably also become economics professors. And then during COVID, I started homeschooling my younger kids too. They were less enthusiastic than my older sons about it. When they reopened the physical schools, then my younger kids went back for a while, decided what they wanted to do. My daughter decided to stay in public school, so that's where she is. My younger son came back to be homeschooled. In terms of what I did, so as a homeschooler, basically, I've got 2 goals. I want to prepare them for independent adulthood and give them a good childhood. Those are the 2 things on my mind. I do know that the system requires them to go and learn certain things and take certain tests. So, and I always very mindful of how to game the system there. But again, the real goal is get them ready for independent adulthood. So find something that you like and are good at and teach you what you need to know in order to do it. And then along the way to enjoy life. So this is something I think regular school isn't so good at. If I can figure out a way to skip something that they're not interested in and isn't helpful in adulthood, then I try to help my kids skip it.
So as far as the other aspect of the equation, as a teacher, I assume you're a teacher. I mean, do you see your greatest teaching in your books or your ancillary activities, your research, or in the actual teaching of teaching? And what differences have you noticed over the decades, say, in the way students receive and or don't receive knowledge, and are they kind of like figuring out a way to game your stuff?
Right. The harsh reality is, especially among undergraduates, the vast majority have very little curiosity about the subject, and they're just there to get a grade. What I normally do when I'm teaching undergraduates is I teach at the top of the class the few people that are really curious and actually want to learn it. And then other people, like what they learn. I have an exam, and people that don't show up or aren't paying much attention or don't care about it usually don't get such good grades. But that's the way that I handle my own teaching. I normally get very good teaching evaluations, which doesn't mean that I'm actually good at putting knowledge durably to their heads. It means I'm more entertaining than the other people, which of course is not that hard. It's not that hard to be more entertaining than a typical college professor, because we're generally really boring by almost any standard. So I'm better than that, but still, I'm not good enough to get attendance in my classes up to 2/3 normally. There's a lot of students that just don't show up because there's something they'd rather be doing. Let's see. I'm going to be honest, say there's a big difference in how I teach my own kids and how I teach my regular students. With the regular students, it's like, okay, well, if you're here and you want to learn, great, I'll teach you. And if you don't want to learn, then that's up to you. I'm not going to go and bother you about it. With my own kids, because they are my lifelong responsibility, I'm a lot more concerned with whether or not they're actually durably learning the material. I say, look, if you're not going to remember this probability stuff, there's no point in me teaching it, because this is, I'm teaching material that I think will actually be useful for you in the future, at least there's a reasonable chance of being useful for you. If you just don't care and aren't interested in it, let's find something else that you do care about and are interested in. Along the way, let me remind you about how there's no such thing as homeschooled university. So you do need, if you want to go to college, to have the requirements for entry. But other than that, I'm really just there to be the Sherpa for my kids to help them get to where they want to go in life.
Right. So out of New York originally, I think there's the Kaplan Institute. Now, I don't know if they call it Kaplan University now, which does.
I was unaware.
Which does college prep.
No, Kaplan with a K. Yes, yes, that I am.
Not you. I think it's actually where Chuck Schumer got his start, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
Okay, so there's the test prep Kaplan, but I didn't know there's an actual Kaplan University.
Well, I think they've tried to expand their concept a little bit. So I might be bloviating on that. But I know there's the Kaplan Institute, whatever they called it.
Yep.
Prep stuff. So let's say in this case we're going to change the K to a C and make it Kaplan University, Bryan Caplan, and you could wipe the slate clean. We're starting a new country. From last night we heard the name Lesotho or something like that, and you get the mandate to do education in this place. So you open up whatever. How would we do it? I mean, what is education? Who gets what? Do we care? Does anybody come close to doing this right about kind of guiding people towards their basic proclivities? Does every car mechanic need to know Latin, and does every Latin professor need to know car mechanics?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if it starts off tax funded, my reaction is let's just refund the taxes to taxpayers or pay down the deficit and shut this down. The world doesn't need another university. But if there's some donor that really wants to back my vision, what I would really enjoy as a professor is a university where the students actually want to be there. So that's step one. And how do you go and manage that? It's one where you put a lot of emphasis upon actually having to go and understand the material. That's where you've got high standards, where people that are not curious about the material that are going to engage with it just can't make it through the program. I've thought a lot about admissions. My honest preferred method of admission is just there's a certain number of 5s you need to get on AP tests. And if you're at that number or above, you get in, and otherwise you're rejected. I think this is better than admitting based upon the SAT, because the SAT is sort of a stupid test. It doesn't go anywhere. Whereas all of the other APs, they teach a subject. Why only count 5s, which are the top score? Because smart people can actually wing a 4, but it doesn't matter how smart you are. You can't wing a 5. You really do have to know your stuff to get a 5 on those exams. In terms of what I would teach people. So again, it's one where you do want them to have the right signals in order to get a job, but if you're actually giving me money to do my dream university, I'd like to give people a deep understanding of the universe. So I'm an economist. Yes, I would definitely require everyone to study economics, and not just to go and regurgitate it, but actually be able to apply it to the real world. World history, especially traditional political, military, economic history is vital for understanding the world. So I require that. Let's see. I like to teach intelligence research, personality research, and psychology. Math, I'm not one of the people that just is romantically in love with math, but I recognize that it is vital for understanding the world. And of course, statistics is the most useful applied kind of math. So require people to learn that stuff as well. So that's basically where I'd be going. In terms of the school closest to what I like, just based upon student selection, University of Chicago has the best students in the world from what I've seen. Right. So they're like other schools have students that are similarly smart, but only Chicago has students that actually are so curious that they will go and attend a 3-hour lecture for no credit for fun.
Right. They're engaged. So this kind of gets back to the kind of the impetus part. If you collect the first 30 people on the subway tomorrow, and then try to tell them about any topic, the likelihood you find anybody interested in that topic is slim. Maybe if it's the Washington Commanders or something like that, or Jaden Daniels prospects.
Don't forget conspiracy theories. A lot of people like conspiracy theories.
Fair enough, and they like they like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and they like whatever. There are things that people gravitate to, whether it's games or so people do like certain things, but a lot of other things they don't. And a public school seems to be this thing where we're putting people in the trains. I mean, and then we're expecting them to go someplace, but we're directing where they go, and we're expecting them to be awake and interested in the whole pathway. So we have Kaplan University, but how about Kaplanizing the school system in general? What happens there if education kind of an overblown thing? What do people do? They're out in the streets. Are they becoming cobblers? We turn to back to 19th century, kids stitching at their family's tailor shop and whatnot, delivering milk. You tell me.
Yeah. So here's my story. It could be wrong, but this is what I say will occur. If we were to go and reduce the typical number of degrees that Americans have by one, so that people right now are college grads, only finish high school, people right now finish high school, only finish middle school, and so on, I predict people will end up in virtually the same jobs they're currently in just 4 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what's going to happen? It's like, well, will they be apprentices? Look, they're apprentices now. Now, when you finish an undergraduate degree and you start working in a bank, you don't actually know what to do. Instead, they use the education as a filter. They say, if you're smart enough to go and get those grades in that school, you can learn this. And now we're going to teach it to you. You learn by doing. So it's not that we're going to go back to a 19th century technology or a 19th century economy. We're not going to be doing cobbling. We're going to be doing basically the same stuff that happens. We're just going to start 4 years earlier.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. I kind of find it a huge waste of time. My younger son.
Right. So by the way, so as an MD, you probably know how in the UK you go straight from high school to medical school.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I understand that.
Yeah.
And I look.
Right? It's like, I assume you have US degrees?
Yeah.
Yep. So did it seem weird to you that you had to do undergraduate before you could go to medical school?
Yeah. I wasn't thinking about that aspect then. But yes, in retrospect, obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed it.
Is there any reason you couldn't have gone straight from high school to medical school?
No reason. No reason. No. This Doogie Howser, became a TV show, but there's no reason that Doogie Howser, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, there's no reason you can't learn it and be adept for another 4 years. People are so degreed. I mean, frankly, there's a lot of MD, PhDs out there practicing medicine and whatnot. And they took, they started, years later than I did.
Yeah, sure.
And I didn't start as a teenager as a medical doctor, but relatively young. I was, and by the time I really, sunk my teeth into it, I was like 26 years old, which is much younger than what people are doing these days for the most part. I had skipped a grade and I kind of went right to it. But, for the most part, it's just kind of a perseveration. They do it because they can. The Turing, the TUR, the Alan Turing machine. Uh-huh. You're supposed to discern whether there's a sentient body on the other side of this, sure, answering device. But it seems to me like I want to become a French teacher, 4 years of college. I want to become a medical doctor, 4 years of college. And the answer is always the same. Is there a sentient being, a presence behind it? The answer is always, you need 4 years of college to do that. I don't think so. I mean, I think there's no flexibility. And so ultimately, I kind of see this. The only analogy I can come up with right now, but when the sperm reaches the egg, it's actually traveling up. Sperm travel at a certain speed, and actually based on the speed they travel, they would not get to the egg. So what actually happens during intercourse, and we all got here, is that there's actually strands of cervical mucus.
The conversation to take this turn, but go on.
Yeah, well, apparently there are like these kind of Elon Musk boring tunnels. There's strands of mucus that come down and that the sperm get on and they just zip up like monorails up to the right target. So that's how we and all other, mammals and probably non-mammals get here, is because it's an acceleration, because the sperm are kind of wandering around. They don't really know where to go. Mm-hmm. They're just kind of milling around. There's lots of them. And there is a goal. There's a target. Now, obviously, in this case, only one gets to succeed, as it were, maybe two sometimes. But, I guess only one. But the fact of the matter, there's
dizygotic too. Dizygotic twins too succeed. Yeah.
So the question I would have, if we can track people young enough, I mean, I don't want to do like this, kind of like movie. I forget which movie that is, AI or something, whatever. ET, or which one is AI, I think, where, you're kind of like pre-thought. So forth. I don't want to have pre-thought. I don't want to like take your 5-year-old and say, oh, you're going to be, a business manager, you're going to be a project manager, you're going to be a mechanic, so forth. There has to be some kind of optional choice. But once those things are decided, you see kind of the proclivities of some person or another. It seems like you could have this kind of cervical mucus tracking where people just learn the things that are basically for that thing. And we have so much, disintermediation of college and whatnot. We could have professors on and people could get the things they like and do the things they like and get along faster and be much better at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense to me. I don't think the cervical mucus slogan is going to fly, but the general idea sounds great.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a better. You'll come up with a better analogy. So you have kind of a graphic novel on immigration. Mm-hmm. That's been a hot topic.
I hadn't noticed.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's out there. You're professor type, I know you're teasing, but tell us what's your essence there.
Here's the way I like to put it. This is something that is just fact. Namely, if you find a Haitian who wants to come to the US and you just give him a green card, he will overnight start earning about 15 times as much money. Right? This is not ideology. This is something you can see with your own eyes. All you need to do to radically multiply the earnings of a low-skilled person in the third world is let them come, and they will suddenly be earning vastly more money. As to how this is possible, right? Just to back up, like if that doesn't amaze you, like it should. Like imagine there were a country where you could go where you would suddenly be making 15 times so much money. All they'd have to do is stamp the papers. Like that would be amazing. And he's like, wow, there's a country like that. That's fantastic. So for most of the world, the US is a country like that. All right, now the question is, how is that possible? Right? And the basic economic answer has to be because the productivity in the United States is 15 times what it was back in Haiti. Right? It's very easy to see this for agriculture. You're going to see that someone who's working in a primitive farm in the third world, you measure how much food they're growing, bring them to the US, put them on a modern agribusiness and see, wow, that person is making vastly more food than they were back home. All right, same thing for manufacturing. If you compare primitive home production to a modern US factory, you can say, that person is producing way more than they were back home. The only puzzle really is for services, because you could say, well, a Haitian shoe shine does the same thing in the US as he does in Haiti. But that's not really true, because the main point of a service is to save time. And when you save more valuable time, you, again, are actually being more productive. When you save an hour of Bill Gates' time, you've contributed a lot more to the world than when you save an hour of my time. So it's clear that the way that immigration drastically raises the income of immigrants is by allowing them to be much more productive. And then the only intellectually serious question, which is the heart of my book, Open Borders, is how many people can we let in and get this benefit from? How scalable is this? If we let in one person, we know for a fact it's going to massively enrich not just that person, but the world, because they're producing a lot more than they were producing before. We can let in 2 people. We can have 5, 10, 100. We can do all that. 1,000, sure. 10,000, yes. 100,000, yes. 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, 1 billion. The only intellectually serious question is there some point where there are some negative side effects of immigration that are so awful that they overpower those incredible obvious gains? What I do in the book is go over all of the major complaints about the alleged horrible, bad side effects of immigration and say some of them are just wrong, and the others are overstated. And so this really is just an incredible opportunity to enrich not just immigrants, but us as their customers. And so, yes, the more the merrier, really. Right. And if you say this is all just a bunch of ivory tower nonsense, say no, wrong. There are a number of countries that are close to the policies I recommend. Which ones? The Gulf monarchies. The Gulf monarchies, which let in enormous numbers of foreigners to work, not just high-skilled workers, not just petroleum engineers. They let in drivers, nannies, janitors, cooks. You can look at United Arab Emirates, famous for the city of Dubai, and see that since the country's founding in 1971, they have multiplied their population by a factor of 34. Almost all that done by immigration. And their economy is one of the richest in the world, right? And if you think about it a bit more, it's like, what else could they have done? Like the whole business model originally is, well, we have all this oil, let's go and drill it, and then we'll share it with the citizens. All right, great. But without those immigrants, what would be happening in Dubai? Would millionaires be paying other millionaires to deliver pizzas? They had to let in low-skilled workers for the money to be even worthwhile. And all of those gains that people are enjoying in the Gulf monarchies could be enjoyed in rich countries around the world if we weren't so stubborn. So that's what the book's about.
So let me ask you, Japan's not been doing that well lately. They kind of have a population shrinkage.
Yeah.
But into the 1980s, I'd say, 70s and 80s, and maybe early 90s, they were the thriving economy, and they had no immigration, no in migration, and they had no diversity. They still have no, I'm sure they have differences between their kind of tribal locations, whatever.
Yeah, well, they're also up to 4% foreign born in Japan, actually.
Say what?
They're up to 4% foreign born, which is a quadrupling since around 2000 when it was 1%. But yeah, it's still
fair enough. Fair enough. But that society got successful, and they were, figuratively, if not literally, decimated in World War II. I don't know if you. I heard there were a couple nuclear bombs that got dropped and whatnot. Those can't be too pleasant. And so this society that was firebombed out of existence, Tokyo, was nothing. It was all wood, and then it was all burnt wood. And yet they had an economy that rivaled any on Earth in short order, and they did it without immigration.
Yeah. So I have never claimed that if you don't have immigration, your society will collapse, or you'll be poor or ruin things. What I say is there's a fantastic opportunity we're ignoring. Right? If you go and look at someone earning $50,000 a year and say, hey, things could be way better. And it's like, well, but I've got $50,000 a year. So what's the difference? Like, well, what if you could be making $1 million a year? How about that? Things could be way better. So I think, countries like Japan, like I've been there. It's a really nice place to visit. They are operating way below potential, right? And like, how do we know what the potential is? Well, go and take a look at what Emirates has done, and then you'll see Japan could easily be twice as rich as what they're doing right now, right? And if you think about it more, like when people say, oh, Japan's doing fine, like, well, what's going on? Yes, they've got a very intelligent workforce, very hardworking. And what does that mean? It means that you have a lot of very smart, hardworking people doing menial jobs, like working in a 7-Eleven. I would consider, as a worker, Japan is a very depressing place to be because the whole country is overqualified for their jobs. They really should let in an enormous number of low-skilled immigrants and have those Japanese be managing them, have those Japanese be forming businesses. Right? The Japanese have totally what it takes to go and be a very entrepreneurial nation, and instead they're settling for this mediocre outcome.
So the converse question would be, what's wrong with making Haiti great again or ever?
Yeah, never has been. Yeah, and the answer is this is the whole field of development economics is devoted to the question of how can we make poor countries rich? And the short answer is it's incredibly difficult. If we put you in charge in Haiti and then said make it rich, it's just really hard to do. Those countries are just so screwed up in hundreds of ways. To go and fix them is really hard. On the other hand, we know a way of saving the Haitians, and that is give them all green cards. Probably the vast majority will move to the US. They will get jobs here. They will be productive. And then once they are that rich, they will go back to Haiti and turn it into turn the depopulated country into a place where they have great retirement communities and tourism.
Because what magic did they absorb here?
Yes. Well, they get to be part of a system that is functioning, which is a big benefit, right? And it's not one. And so again, there is the possibility, couldn't they wreck our system instead of us going and improving them? Let's go and take a look at actual historical experience. Actual historical experience is that it goes the other way. And when you get people that are low tech, poor organization, lots of problems, let them go and work in a system that is functional. It fixes them. It doesn't break the regular system. So, I think probably under open borders, probably 90% of Haitians would leave. The remaining ones would get a whole lot of remittances, and they would actually be much richer than they are now. And once the Haitian migrants had absorbed what it means to go and have a functional society, I think that would be the best chance for going and fixing Haiti. But probably most of them would just want to go and have a vacation home or something back there. They would just be happier here because it just works.
So Argentina elected an economist, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
And
Javier Milei.
Argentina.
Javier Milei es excelente, fantástico.
Yeah. So is he making Argentina great ever or again? I don't know if it was ever great before, but certainly they've had all kinds of issues. I think they're the wealthiest. I guess Venezuela was the wealthiest country in the 60s. Argentina certainly had the possibility, high education.
Well, if I'm right, that doesn't matter much, but go on.
Fair enough. But clearly they've had their issues of kind of rapacious, predatory governments and kind of socialist leanings, which I think is what took Japan down in a sense, is kind of like the draining of vitality through socialist onerous taxation and whatnot. But it seems to me, if we fast forward a couple of years, that Argentina might be a place where of in-migration. So, Dubai has the oil, and Argentina may or may not. I have no idea.
I don't think they do.
Well, they probably have
Not
some.
much.
They have
Not
a,
much,
they have a
yeah.
river
It's
delta.
big, so yeah, they probably got some somewhere, but not much, I don't think.
Well, fair enough. So they probably have places they haven't, looked yet. Who knows? But the question is, if you can turn that place to in-migration, shouldn't we just put Javier Milei's and Nayib Bukele into other countries? Insofar as we can, but shouldn't that be kind of a luminary example of cervical mucus stranding, to use my horrible example, a bungee jumping, a bungee cord that would have people.
Yeah. And again, the obvious answer is they would never get elected in other first world countries. So you would have to have a total change in the system in order for that to happen. In terms of what Javier Milei is doing in Argentina, I think like the totally mainstream view is that he has been extremely successful in getting hyperinflation down to much lower levels. Not totally great, but he has mostly solved that problem using the standard obvious ways of drastically cutting deficits, austerity, and then at least this grotesque problem of hyperinflation you get rid of. Now, the deeper one of can he restructure the Argentine economy, do mass privatization, do durable cuts to government spending, that's still unclear. So, I mean, I wish him luck. I hope so. But, historically, it seems like the best bet is once he gets things running tolerably, once the hyperinflation is gone, then voters will go and re-elect and put some people back in power that messed things up in the first place, and they'll just continue their cycle. I think if I remember correctly, Argentina has knocked 15 zeros off the currency over the last 60 years or so.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
So, they had repeated hyperinflations, and then things stop, and they get you, and then all right, we're getting a little too far, and then it starts again. I mean, I hope that Javier can go and permanently get Argentina on a better path, but historical precedent says he won't.
Yeah, I've been handing out these 1 million bolivares. They're like $1 million of Venezuelan from 2020, not that long ago. I think they've redone it. I have a friend who's a professor, expat from Venezuela, and I'm like, what do they have now? So they go, they just have dollars. I'm sure they don't just have dollars. They have this bolivares, which I pronounce bolivares, but they say the accent's on the I.
Bolivares, yes.
So this hyperinflation, winds up having kind of a different standard where the money becomes something else. I don't know if you want to talk about what it means like these days, given that there's some, interstate commerce, whatever. If the Zimbabwean dollar, goes up a millionfold or down a millionfold in value, up in denomination numbers, how many zeros and whatnot. What does that mean on the ground? How does inflation actually affect people? Do we have any worries right now? What do you see as a prospect here? But I don't know, pick and choose.
Right. So, hyperinflations by all accounts are extraordinarily disruptive. People just wind up putting a lot of mental energy and time into not losing everything they have from inflation. The idea that you can just dollarize around from it, dollarization does help, but still in every country, there's a bunch of transactions that must legally be done in the denomination of the country. So you still have to be worrying about that. It's also true that normally after hyperinflations, countries revert back to the original currency. You might think that once you ruin a currency and people switch to dollars, they'll stay with dollars, but that doesn't seem to generally be true. There is some talk in Argentina about permanently dollarizing, basically to put some handcuffs on the government so they just give up on the idea of hyperinflation. If you get away with that, seems like a good idea, but hard to do. In terms of the U.S., we have inflation that is a rounding error compared to Argentina, but still over the last 5 years has been extremely high by U.S. standards. And then as to whether it's going to just happen again under Trump, it's an interesting question. You have a combination of a lot of deficit spending and a cooperative central bank and a bunch of supply shocks from tariffs and things like that. And that wouldn't be at all surprising if inflation shot up again. Not ready to make any bet on that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, so first of all, we're rounding out our time together. So I still have some questions. What do you think is the prime motivation of inflation? A, B, how did you get where you are philosophically? Where did you start out? How did you get here? And C would be, what's the best way, if any, for taxation for a system?
All right. It's a lot of questions. Why do you get inflation? Again, standard story is countries get really high inflation when they're running crazy high budget deficits. So if they want to spend a lot more than raising in taxes, countries like that, it's very hard for them to borrow money because people say, hey, you don't have any plan, so we're not going to lend you money. And then it's like, okay, well, we have the printing press, we can print up the difference. But the problem is once you start doing that, prices start rising and you have to keep printing more and more and more money in order to maintain the deficits. For countries like the US, again, it was basically that Biden wanted to go and spend a lot more money without raising taxes. And the central bank was willing to go along with that. So it wasn't anywhere near as extreme as Argentina, of course. How did I get where I am philosophically? I'd say that when I was 17, I read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, and that got me curious about these questions. And then I started reading other people's, she has all this stuff about how great free markets are, which was really different from anything I'd ever heard. I'd always heard about how they were really bad. I then said, is it even possible to do what she's recommending? And I started reading economics and said, I started reading the economist she recommended, the Austrian economists, and they all say she's right. And then after some months, I said, well, what do normal economists think? And I read what they had to say. And, so I wound up getting my PhD in economics from Princeton. So I think I know pretty well what people say about markets versus government. I generally have the view that Ayn Rand's instinct was right, even though she didn't understand the arguments on that deep of a level. And then the last one was, what's the best system of taxation? There is a textbook answer here. The best system of taxation is taxing things that are bad. Tax pollution, tax murder, tax road congestion. The only country that I know of that raises much revenue for this is Singapore, but it's totally doable. And again, the logic is basically this. All right. Well, let's go and tax work. Well, what could go wrong with taxing work? Oh, people might work less. All right, fine. Let's go and tax investment. Oh, that could go wrong. Oh, people might tax investment. Oh, well, people might stop investing. That's bad. All right. How about we go and we tax murder? Oh no, if we tax that too much, people stop murdering people. All right. And that's the logic of it is, since a tax is going to lead to a change in behavior, it's better to tax something where you want the behavior to become more scarce. And this is known in economics as Pigovian taxation. Very rarely done, but the logic of it is pretty clear.
So if we theoretically could tax Jeffrey Epstein because he killed himself, unless somebody else did.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that if you would go and expropriate criminals who kill themselves, then again, that would be like, well, then criminals would be less likely to kill themselves. Maybe it's actually good when criminals kill themselves, actually. So that's, anyway.
Right, but so your average murderer,
fewer people want to be Jeffrey Epstein if that happens.
Presumably, your average murderer, not exclusively, is probably murdering without money. So how's that going to help?
Yes. Well, again, of course, this is an extreme example. Let's see. I suppose we could sell their organs. We could put them in indentured servitude. There's lots of ways of doing it if you've got an open mind about it. But again, of course, the real money is going to be made in things like taxing congestion, or also just charging a toll for driving during peak times, taxing pollution. So this is where you could actually make a lot of money. And again, these are things where you don't want to make the tax $1 trillion because then you will actually just keep everybody off the roads and you'll destroy all the technology that we're relying on. But moderate taxation of these things, it gives you a moderate reduction of something that's causing some problems while also raising some revenue. The logic is strong.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right.
Professor.
Sure thing.
Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Look forward to talking to you again sometime. Keep up the excellent work, great books. And if you can just hang around a little bit afterwards,
no problem.
to have this upload. Thank you.
Roger that.